Welcome to This Dementia Life, created by Dementia Action Alliance. Our website is daanow.org. I'm proud to be your host, Chuck McClatchy, and I live my dementia life with Alzheimer's disease. During this Dementia Life podcast, we will have conversations with inspiring people living with dementia and from the amazing people who care about us. And one of those amazing people is with me today, and I'm so honored to have her, is Teepa Story. She is an activist, she is a trainer, she is an educator, and just has such passion for and caring for people with dementia. Teepa, why don't you tell us a little bit where your passion and your desire, comes from, and the love that you show us.
Well, hi, Chuck, and I am more than honored to be with you because this is what I do, and the reason I do it is I think maybe I can help make a difference.
Teepa, please tell us where your passion and your energy comes from, and the story about your grandfather. That's incredible.
Yeah. So as a small girl, my grandmother died, and she had had rheumatoid arthritis. And my grandparents lived in Cleveland. We lived in Pittsburgh. And we went to the funeral, and we didn't realize how much my grandma had been helping my grandfather and making a difference for him. Apparently, she was the brains of the operation, and he kept things going. So when she passed away, we had the funeral, everything seemed okay. We went back home to Pittsburgh, and my mom got a call in the middle of the night saying, "You need to come get your father. He's breaking into apartments," because he thinks he's the superintendent of the apartment, and he hadn't done that in over 30 years. So he was doing some time traveling, and he also worried people because he was doing things he shouldn't be doing, taking sinks apart. So we went out and got him and brought him back, and he wasn't thrilled with it, but he came along. But then once he got back with us in Pittsburgh, he would say, "Well, now listen, I've got to get back to Cleveland. Flo's there." And my mom would say, "Dad, Mom's dead. What part are you not remembering? That's why you're here." And he would get angry because she was angry. And so they would go at each other. And he'd say, "Well, I'm not staying here. I'm going back to Cleveland." And so I learned pretty quick to help. One of the best things to do is, "Grandma, if you leave, no one will be here when Mom has to stay after school, and I'll be by myself. Please don't leave me by myself." And he would say, "Okay, well, I'll stay for one day, but then I'm not staying anymore." And so that allowed him to stay for years and years. My mom never got to be better at this, so I got to be really good at this. I actually learned to cook because my grandfather wanted dinner on the table at 5 o'clock. I also got to be his driving partner. And back in those days, we didn't even know he had dementia. We just thought all old people got eccentric, and he was really eccentric. But he would actually drive me to school. And one morning he went straight through a stop sign, didn't even pause. And I went, "Oh, Grandpa, that was a stop sign." He goes, "What stop sign?" And so I said to Mom, "I don't think he's safe driving anymore." She goes, "Well, you just need to warn him sooner." And so he kept driving. And I just learned to be better. "Oh, Grandpa, stop sign coming up. It's coming up. Oh, it's coming up. Foot on the brake, foot on the brake, foot on the brake. Yes. Good. Yeah, you got it. Let's look. Nothing's coming. Okay, you can go to foot on the gas. Foot on the gas. There you go, Grandpa. Good. And then I just hoped he'd get back home, which he got lost a few times. And my mom still wasn't getting it. So anyway, that's sort of how it started. And then I worked with kids with developmental disabilities as a teenager, which is actually how I got my name, because it was Teena and it became Teepa, with a little boy with autism and a speech problem. And I legally changed it to Teepa. And then my grandma on the other side developed Alzheimer's. And so I got to help her, but by then we knew it was a dementia. We knew Alzheimer's, sort of, organic brain syndrome. And she also had the hardening of the arteries because she's from West Virginia. So it was the hardening of the arteries. But we didn't have a lot of skill. And so I did a lot of things. When I'm looking back, it was like, boy, that was really stupid. Why did people tell us to do stuff like that? And that strong she was a Southern Baptist. Dick's mom was the Presbyterian. she swore at me, and she never swore. I made her so mad, and she goes, "What the hell? I will knock the shit out of you." And it was just like, whoa, Grandma, you can't say things like that. She told you tell me what I can say. And it just escalated and aggravated. And ay, ay, ay. Now that I look back, it's like, boy, am I glad I've gotten better at this. So I think the passion comes not just from family experiences, but I went into occupational therapy. And for the past 40 years, I've worked with people with a variety of brain changes, head injury, stroke, having birth changes like cerebral palsy, having changes after things that happen to people, and including dementia. And so I've gotten better at this, and I've learned lots of things, and I found there were big holes in what people understood about dementia. And therefore, if you don't understand what's happening, it's easy to blame the person living with dementia for what's going on, when it's actually a combination of brain changes, environment, task, what you're asking the person to do, and how you're behaving. And so it's like, whoa, time out. I can't fix dementia, but I could have us do things a little differently, and we have a really different outcome. And I've done it a lot, so I know it actually is possible.
So glad you brought that up, because there's so many other diseases that cause dementia. And
Indeed.
dementia itself is, we all kind of suffer from a lot of the same symptoms, but every person is a little bit different. I know with me, what you really brought out is when you were demonstrating the way a lot of people talk to us and got right in our face, the fear look I had in my face was real. Because it takes you back, because you're trying to understand what they want. Why do you think it's so hard for people to understand that we don't like people in our face? And the difference that you presented, I think, was so apparent, of just taking the hand and saying, "Hi, my name is Teepa." And why is it so hard for people to understand?
Because with certain people, I think they can get away with it. And so because they get away with getting in people's face and leaning in and sending messages, and the person looks anxious, or, "So do you want something or not?" And the person just goes, "No, I'm fine." And they think that means everything's okay. It's not okay. It's just the person goes, "Let's just disengage. I'd rather disengage than try to figure out how to interact with you." But the person living without dementia thinks, well, then they're fine. And it's like, no, you made them give up is what happened, because you got them so distressed. And my point is, that's actually a human reaction. It's not a reaction of having dementia. The dementia part is that I don't have always the control over myself to say, "Excuse me, if you wouldn't mind turning sideways and giving me a little space and pausing, it would really help me to be able to understand what you're asking me and communicating." But in the moment, the emotion comes up, and there aren't any, just wait a minute is more of a common, putting your hands up and go, "Whoa, whoa, well, just, I don't know, just leave it alone," is that distress state, because that's a primitive brain in that moment going, "I don't know what this person is after, but you're trapped and you better get out of here, because you got to get them away from you, or you got to get away from them. This could go badly." And so the reality is that people living without dementia assume that people living with dementia are going to misbehave. The number of people that I run across who say, "Well, when do they get violent?" And it's like, when you piss them off, actually, is pretty much it, or when you surprise them, or when you frustrate someone, or when you're expecting people to do something that you wouldn't want to do without giving them time or perspective or giving them a chance and forcing the issue. That's when people might or might not get violent. What they're typically going to do first is say, "I said no, what part did you not hear?" And because people not having dementia don't want to change, it's easier to stay myself and do it the way I've always done it and blame you than it is to acknowledge, oh, way I'm doing this is not okay with you. So maybe I could try something different that might be okay. And so showing someone, look, I have an empty hand and I want to shake your hand. Are you okay with that? To me is a perfectly reasonable way to start a conversation and an interaction. Because I can tell right away whether, if you're not wanting to take my hand, I find it hard to imagine that you're going to want me to take your clothes off. Just a thought. Or that you're going to want me to lean in on you, or you're going to want me to try to get you to drink something, or to give me your checkbook. If we can't even greet each other, why would I assume that it's going to be okay for me to do more than that, even though I'm trying to help? So it's just a very different way, I find, of getting people to take a step back and think about what they're doing and how to do it differently, so you don't get to this place of believing and thinking and behaving in a way that, to me, is unacceptable. I wouldn't want anybody to do it to me. Why should I do it to somebody living with dementia who has the potential to have a brain that sometimes doesn't do what it should? I mean, I wish your brain worked like it ought to, but I can't be in control of it. If I could, you know what? I wouldn't have it at all.
Oh, exactly. One of the things I think you hit on so well is I've actually interviewed some care facilities, and I think sometimes I'm the first person that they've carried on a conversation with. And what scared me there was a couple of them that I wouldn't talk to the people in the memory care.
Mm-hmm.
And just that, how do you support somebody that you might see as having kind of a rough day, and it's kind of obvious they're a little agitated or frustrated. Teepa, actually, there was a couple of them that says, well, we work it out with the doctors and we have drugs here for them.
Exactly. That is still the knee jerk. I don't care what the federal government does to reduce antipsychotic use. Mostly what it's done is convert a lot of people to using anti-anxiety drugs. They're managing people or using things that are used for seizures. I mean, it's really frightening that they're still reaching for the phone for the doctor and for the medication to throw in somebody, when what they really need to be doing is taking a step back and going, it looks like you're having a crappy day. Was it something I did or something that's going on out here? And the person then could say, no, it's me. And I could go, it's you. Yeah. Something you're thinking or something you're feeling. And by using some fairly simple visual cues, those visual cues help the person who's having some language difficulty. Because when I do this over my head and then I do this and I pause, thinking like you're thinking things and it's not good, or you're feeling things and it doesn't feel good. And I provide you with an either or. Your brain then can make that choice, and it's easier to make that choice. And then I know, okay, so they're thinking things, but no, this person actually, maybe it's their arthritis, and their arthritis is acting up and their back is really bothering them. But they haven't actually figured that out because they're just not feeling good.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because I have back issues, and we've talked about it before. One of my fears is acting out. Well, I deal with severe frustration, which a lot of people do. And when I went to a few of these nursing homes, there were a couple that were good, and they said, we try to understand the person. We try to talk with them, and maybe we can understand why they're upset and try to get them doing something else, talking about something. We kind of do more one-on-one. And it was like, well, yeah, that may be what the person needs, because it may be as easy as my back hurts and I can't tell you this, but I'm in pain.
Yeah. So I agree with you. I think, Chuck, the biggest challenge is administration may say one thing, and then the real live hands-on people, that's a whole nother layer. And one of the biggest challenges I find in many care situations is the turnover is so extreme. Mostly because I would say one of the reasons is people who are the primary care providers are not provided with the training and the explanations and the ability to understand what's going on, and so how they can behave differently and get a different outcome. And so they don't feel very successful. They are frustrated. They get distressed, and either they do something they shouldn't or they get worn out and they step away, and then we bring somebody else in. Well, the worst thing for somebody living with dementia classically is having 20 different people.
Okay, one other question. Have you been able to do much work with these temporary nursing companies? It seems like more and more they're kind of taking over, all the lapses in coverage that a lot of these nursing homes have.
Yeah, so unfortunately, they feel like they don't need this because it's just a temporary thing they're going to be doing. So why should they get all skilled and everything? Because they're just a temporary fix-it. So this becomes a real toilet bowl, if you ask me, because what we do is we put unskilled people in who are unfamiliar with a person in an unfamiliar place, doing tasks with a person that they're not familiar with. And it's a recipe for absolutely disaster. Now, what they're very familiar with is how to make the phone call to the doctor and how to get the meds, or how to call 911 and say, I need an emergency discharge.
I think for my last question, and this is kind of important to a lot of people, the next person watching this video, they might have just gotten diagnosed, and they have all of these issues going through their head, what the latter stages are, what am I going to do? Yeah. They're afraid, they're angry, all of those emotions. What would you tell them that could help?
I think number one is there are people and now some organizations out there that are for you. They are not for your caregivers. They're not for your care partners. They're not for your family yet. Because the first person that has to wrap their head around what's going on and get the right support for them is you. And if you have the awareness that things are changing and that you recognize something is going on for you, time out. That is something that has to happen first before anything else. Finding that place in that space where you can ask questions, you can be sad, you can cry, you can get angry, you can feel that change in yourself, and then go, you know what, that sucks, Chuck, and I hate it for you. But here's what I'm going to tell you. I think we can get someplace different. But I want to hear what you have to say about it. I would also say are you a person that is better joining a small group, or is it going to be better for you to find a one-on-one support that you can explore this thing you're living with now, and raise questions, ask things? Because I will also say there are people out there that say they'll support people living with dementia, but they don't have the expertise in dementia. They may be great in psychology or they may be great in medicine, but they're not knowledgeable about dementia. And I think one support is another person living with dementia. Because although you're different people, there are similarities that I don't have that. I'm at the moment, I'm not living with it, although I live around it a lot. But then finding somebody who can work with the two of you, or sometimes with you, and sometimes you two work together. But finding somebody who's knowledgeable about the progression of this and how that might play out, so that we can start to look around for who needs to get what kind of support around you, so that you'll be supported through whatever you're going through. And maybe working with some family members to change some ways of saying things or doing things or offering support. because families can be really trying to help, but not have a lot of skill in helping, like my mom. And I will say there are some people who actually should never be a primary care partner for somebody who has dementia. And my mom was a great example. She was a wonderful phys ed teacher, but she wasn't a particularly caring person. And so it just didn't work for her. So it was a good thing I was around. But on the other hand, when she developed dementia late in her life due to brain metastases from a lung cancer that metastasized, I was the right person for her. Because I got her, and so she'd say, well, this sucks, and I'd say, yeah, sure does. She goes, I hate this, and I'd say, yep, me too, Mom. But I think finding that person that you're going to be able to match up with, or for some people, a dog, to be honest, because you don't want to talk about it for right now, but finding a support for you, whatever it is. What we don't want it to be is isolation, alcohol, immobility, inactivity, silence. That's not a place to go. That I know. That I know doesn't lead to anything good. So finding a way to have somebody knock on your door, get permission, and say, hey, Chuck, tell me a little bit about how it was at the doctor's, because that was a pretty heavy thing that happened. Can we talk about it a little bit? Versus, Dad, we have to talk about this. You have, and it's just the difference between an invitation and permission and trying to help but not knowing how.
That is awesome. I want to thank you so much for being here. You inspire people. I hope to, in the future, have you back again. Maybe you won't have so many technical difficulties, but here we go. I'd like to thank Dementia Action Alliance for their support, and on behalf of This Dementia Life, I'd like to thank you for joining us today, and you can view other podcasts on our website at daanow.org. Click on podcast. Please join me to meet inspiring people and the amazing people on This Dementia Life. I'm your host, Chuck McClatchy. Remember, the brain may forget, but the heart remembers. I'll see you next time on This Dementia Life.
I can almost make a heart.